igama lamakhosikazi malibongwe, igama lamakhosikazi malibongwe, 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 igama lamakhosikazi malibongwe, igama lamakhosikazi.
On the 9th of August 1956, 20,000 women marched to the Union building in South Africa, petitioning against the imposition of influx control measures. The Urban Areas Act was designed to limit the number of Africans in urban areas. Africans were required to carry permits, called passes, to show that they were legally permitted to be in towns that were deemed whites-only spaces. At this march, Dora Tamana, a member of the ANC Women's League, declared,
"We women will never carry these passes. This is something that touches my heart. I appeal to you young Africans to come forward and fight. These passes make the road even narrower for us. We have seen unemployment, lack of accommodation, and families broken because of passes. We have seen it with our men. Who will look after our children when we go to jail for a small technical offense, not having a pass?"
This day of defiance, assertion of rights, and the demand for safety and security by South African women is celebrated as Women's Day. It marked a turning point for women. They now became active participants in the quest for freedom in their country. South African women have achieved the extraordinary. They have struggled and fought alongside men against a formidable, oppressive, racist, and sexist state. They have ensured that their rights were enshrined in the new constitution establishing a non-racial democratic South Africa, and that these rights would be implemented through the enactment of gender-sensitive legislation, the establishment of institutions to promote women's rights, and through the practice of affirmative action. This vigorous pursuit of gender equality has borne tangible dividends. South Africa is currently nearing gender parity in its legislature and in its executive. Women occupy 43% of parliamentary seats and 41% of the cabinet ministers are women. These are not only the soft positions normally assigned to women. In this country we have a woman as the Minister of Defence and Veterans Affairs, Minister of Home Affairs, Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, and Minister of Mineral Resources. In 2009, a new Ministry of Women, Children and People with Disabilities was created to drive the government's equity, equality and empowerment agenda. The goal, in line with the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development, is 50-50 gender parity by 2015. Is this achievable in the security sector? What have South African women been doing to change the face and ethos of this bastion of male dominance? In the peace and security sector, the dominant gendered construction has always been that of men as providers of security and women as the vulnerable group in need of protection. This face is changing, and South Africa is leading the way. The South African National Defence Force has 24% women in its ranks, and 21% of the police service officers are women. South Africa leads the continent in terms of the absolute number of women deployed on peacekeeping missions, where women are daily putting their lives at risk to bring peace and security in conflict zones. Achieving this has been no easy feat. This documentary focuses on the achievements and challenges of women in the security sector. It profiles these achievements through the stories of 3 women who have been instrumental in transforming the gendered nature of the security sector. Major General Ntsiki Memela-Motumi, Chief Director of Transformation and Management at the South African National Defence Force, Dr. Singh, previously Deputy National Commissioner in the South African Police Services and now Director of Human Resources at the University of South Africa, and the Honourable Thandi Modise, former Chair of the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Defence and the Joint Standing Committee on Defence, and currently the Deputy Secretary General of the African National Congress. Their journeys are illustrative of the many women who have contributed to ensuring that the South African security sector is responsive to the needs of women. We celebrate the achievements of women in the security sector, for this year is the 10th anniversary of the landmark United Nations Resolution 1325 that calls for the protection of women during conflict, the participation of women in peacemaking, peacekeeping and peacebuilding, and the promotion of women in decision-making. The stories of these women bring inspiration for the long journey ahead to provide protection to women and to situate women as agents in the quest for peace and security on our continent.
Honourable Thandi Modise, let me start by thanking you first for granting us time for this interview. Tell us, Mama, a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think even before that one must thank the heroes, our foremothers, who set the right trail for us to follow. I am Thandi Modise. I was born in Vryburg. Everybody knows Vryburg used to be a capital of one of the Boer republics. It's a small town, very rural, very conservative. Conservative is putting it light. It's still really steeped in apartheid. 16 years down, you still have this black-white colored Indian divide. You don't actually have an integrated society that is looking at its own development there.
So, Mama, how did you come to join the ANC, coming from this very conservative community?
My father was an ANC activist, and I think he tagged my mother along. Vryburg is a very conservative town. When I grew up, there was no high school. You had to go to another town to get into a high school. Because the people, black people, had refused to move. Remember the forced removals? The people there had refused to move. So there was a deliberate policy that the township would not be developed. So we did not have amenities, we did not have anything. And we grew up in this small township, very frustrated, very vocal. And when I went to matric and the Soweto uprisings began, obviously I had moved now because I had to move out of Vryburg. I was in my Mafikeng at Barolong High School. We then discussed as students and decided that even though Barolong High School as such was not going to be affected by the Africans, we had another monster looming. Mangope was preparing for his Buputetswana. Suddenly, without consultation, we were going to be taken away from our own country, be parceled into what was Buputetswana. We were, without being consulted, losing our citizenship, which in any case at that time we were trying to talk about and to fight for, being then second-class citizens of South Africa. You are even going to lose that. So for me, there was a battle on two fronts. It was the education one, it was this one to fight to retain my citizenship of South Africa.
Mama, walk us through the moment where you joined the ANC.
Well, Snuki Zigalala Keith Mukwape had been busy for a while, long before the student riots in 1976. They were already in Botswana. They were recruiting for the ANC and for Mkhonto weSizwe. And that is at the time when my consciousness, my will to fight was aroused. But after the riots, after the police shot at us, after we decided that that whole region was not going to go to school, was going to join in the battle against Bantu education and oppression in general, I then left the country. I left the country a young woman wanting to go and do battle, as I said, for the two reasons, education and retention of my citizenship, but I also wanted to fight because at the age of 15, I'd been raped, I'd been impregnated. The courts failed me and my mother. I then decided I wasn't going to pursue school. I was going to join Umkhonto weSizwe. And in fact, that's what I went on to do. I fought to be a woman even in the ANC military camps. We observed August 9 in those military camps. We were very clear that whatever it was necessary for us to retain our feminine identity for a number of reasons. That it was correct for women to take up arms because certain battles we believed even then that they could only be won, they could only be understood by other women. That it was not wrong for women, secondly, to have a voice in any democratic system they were fighting for, because for many generations, African women had been left out. You'll remember that even our foremothers, Abu Charlotte Maxeke, had actually fought to be recognized as full ANC members who were female. Women, at a time when the ANC decided to recognize us, they recognized us as auxiliary members. We could be seen, we could organize food, we could fundraise. We did not have a voice. So these women fought for that. It was an interesting journey. There were very few of us women. And so you had to fight over a number of things.
What stories can you tell us of some of these fights?
I can tell you that MK women deserved to be commanders and commissars. Because I remember when we set up a camp in Angola, the Novo Katenga camp, that most of us dug those trenches and the guys would stand there smoking cigarettes. You want equality? That is equality. And we fought and we dug those trenches. And some of us had never actually known how to dig, so we had blisters with it. We then had to fight to be recognized, not as she comrades, and that was very necessary.
And we've got a beautiful shot there out of the air of the Union buildings itself and people marching. As you can see, thousands of women, and I saw a few men, I don't know about you women, who actually arrived for Women's Day.
Mama, 1994 comes. How do you negotiate your identity, your position? How did you move up the different ranks of the ANC, and can you walk us through the different roles you've played and until now?
1979 comes and I get arrested. And 1989 comes, I'm just out of jail, and I go to the Malibongo conference in Amsterdam. That Amsterdam conference of South African women is historic in that it invited all South African women. Mrs. de Klerk's organizations were represented. They called themselves the peace movement or something. We didn't recognize any peace, but we recognized that even though ideologically we were not the same, we needed all South African women to come together. That was important because at that conference, the ANC women, some of them understanding a bit of what security is all about, started putting out papers, started educating other women of what a South Africa that is stable, that is at peace, will mean to all of us. I remember that at that conference, as I said, I gave a paper which spoke to the demilitarization of South Africa. And I don't think most of those women really understood what it was until we made examples about the fact that all South African white women were too scared to talk to black counterparts, too scared to ask questions about the then SADF, too scared to stand by their sons when their sons refused to go into the Defence Force. So we started there, talking about this. We went into Parliament. I was a reluctant parliamentarian, to tell you the honest fact. I had wanted to go into the Defence Force. My interest then in security does not just stem from the fact that I went into a military base at 18, 17. It also stems from understanding that even at that time, at the elections, at the negotiations, we from this building, because we started here and then we went there to Shell House, we actually had to threaten to stop the talks. And we did for one day. To stop those talks at CODESA unless all the players there brought in women's representation.
Well, I grew up in Soweto, in Diepkloof in particular, and my current position is Chief Director, Transformation Management. My brief is to institutionalize human rights and equity principles within the SANDF. As someone who was in MK and during the political negotiations, the whole question, of integrating all armed forces into one, which would then be the new SANDF, came into the fore, and I then was part of the negotiating teams, however, was responsible for the medical side of it. And as a social worker, we then looked at the psychosocial programs that we needed to put in place, so that all integrating forces would be able to deal with the stress of integration. Remember, these were yesterday's enemies who were now supposed to work together. So we needed to seriously look into what programs would we then bring in, to build that social cohesion within the armed forces. Well, what we noted firstly was that the South African medical services was the environment that seemed to have a lot of women at the time. And when you looked at the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, it became apparent that women in those services were predominantly in the support corps, which were like your logs, your HR, your defense intelligence, etc. So women were definitely in the majority within the SAMs.
What were the specific challenges that faced women at the time?
Well, the first challenge, which was also noticed before the actual integration, was the fact that, policy at the time stipulated that women were not supposed to serve in the combat corps. So it became important that this issue was addressed. And again, during the negotiations, a sub-work group headed by my predecessor, General Ntsiki Memela-Motumi, then looked into, what type of policies needed to be put in place in order to ensure that women were found everywhere. This was, of course, motivated by the fact that those who came from non-statutory forces were already used to serving with women in the trenches. So we needed to bring that into this new SANDF. So it was now a question of ensuring that, with the new policy, women were then allowed to serve wherever they chose to. Well, as somebody who was coming from MK, my MK rank was that of a lieutenant colonel. So this therefore meant that when I entered into the SANDF, I was already at middle management. I was a lieutenant colonel. So that was in 1994. And as I'm a social worker by profession and was already looking after the welfare needs of ex-combatants, so I was then deployed in the social work department. And in 1998, I was then promoted to full colonel.
you know, and my responsibility there was really to look into recruitment of social work officers and also address policy and planning issues. And then when my general took a package in 2000, the post became vacant, and then I applied, and I was then appointed as Director of Social Work with the rank of a Brigadier General in 2000. And then five years later, I was promoted again into this post, which is a Chief Director, Transformation Management, and it's a Major General's rank. Both the white paper in defense and the defense review stating very categorically that women have every right to serve in the armed forces, including combat. And again, the whole question of women's representativity in all rank groups was also stated, and women are now considered.
It is a challenge that if it can happen to one woman or one woman can make it, that means all of us as women, we can. There is nothing that can stop us. It just depends on us. It depends on the mind shift of individual. It's a challenge.
Okay, so how's the journey been from when you started back then till now?
Yeah, to be honest, from the beginning, it was slightly tough, that there were too much expectations. Some could not believe that being a woman, you can lead a fighting corps, starting from Umtata, where I started commanding. And of course, there were those who had positive attitude that I will make it, because I was a company commander at 6I Battalion in Grahamstown before I took over the battalion in Umtata. So they knew that there is nothing different from me. I do exactly the same like the other commanders are doing, as we are trained the same.
Other than changing policy to accommodate women to serve in combat, I mean, one of the key areas where, you know, the whole question of civic education, structural transformation, demographics, question of processes, diversity management, you know, military culture, what would then be the new military culture, because we have now all these different groupings coming together into one. So those were really the essence of the transformation agenda, and again, leadership. Or, you know, what type of leadership do we require for this new era? So that was, in essence, what the transformation agenda was all about.
It's necessary to think of security also as a contributor to democratization, and the other way around, because if you don't ensure that proper representation is there, you will not achieve democratization, you will not have a stability, you will not have peace. So for me, all of them have been interlinked then. And there is no way, even in an equal and democratized society, that I can expect a male person to speak on my behalf. I think that that's a very long way to go. So you need to bring women there, but these women need to understand the areas of importance. You need, even now I think we need to do quite a lot more. You need to bring women more into the security sector. They are not there. If they are there, it's administration. If they are there, they think of the glory of the James Bond thing, get into the intelligence and see countries and whatever. That's not it. We need to bring women into the security sector, into the positions of decision making, because it is important to us. The old story that says men make war. They get angry with each other. Sometimes we don't even understand. They fight. We bear the brunt. Our children bear the brunt. Old people bear the brunt. And it then becomes my business as a woman to be able to get near the table where they're going to take the decision. And for me, my work as a chairperson, both of the Portfolio Committee of Defense and the Joint Standing Committee of Defense in Parliament, was to push as many women into those decision-making tables so that we can hear, we can participate, we can agree, we can disagree. And that is something I'm very proud that I did. managed to get to Uganda and get women interested in getting into portfolio committees of defense. Managed to get to Ghana and do the same. Managed to get to Nigeria and do the same. Managed to get to Tanzania and do the same. And then once you have whetted this curiosity and appetite to get in there, to begin to then say, and this is what you need to do there. I'm also very happy that I've managed to get the chance to get into all these countries and to say, for me as a woman parliamentarian, what does security translate into? How can I make sure that the people I represent, his voice is heard in the security sector? How do I influence policy? And as I say, for us in the ANC, it was made easy because, one, we had fought, and therefore they could not say we know nothing, we don't understand. Secondly, at the time, during the TEC, we had women studying now formally into the security, so that when we went to Parliament, nobody could bring concepts we didn't understand. We knew them, we'd studied them. Thirdly, we then got very, very involved. Now, it's important to look at the Joint Standing Committee of Defense in South Africa, because it's one of the most important committees since it has this constitutional mandate. It has the right to basically interfere in anything military, because it is enabled, it is empowered to put questions on the functioning of the National Defence Force, on the morale of the National Defence Force, on the budget of the National Defence Force. And this is the vehicle we then used in 1994 to say, okay, we're not happy about representation. And coming from Umkhonto weSizwe, it was important for women in the ANC benches to say, Haibu, why would you say to us that women cannot be in infantry? Why would you say to us they cannot fly planes and they can't be in the boats? So in fact, the first gender conference of the Defence Force was led by us. We had this important role to play. Firstly, open up for women, and open up for women we did. If the matters have regressed, then I regret it, because one of the things we went for was to look at how the women's uniform was tailored. People thought, oh no, but that is unnecessary. Now that was very important, because if that shoe is not comfortable, that woman is not going to be able to take it. That woman is not going to stand, is not going to run, is going to be declared unfit. So it was our business as women, having worn military shoes designed for men, it was necessary for us to say, no, this one is not right. It was necessary for us to go to even say this pair of pants does not suit this woman. She can't run in this one. She's not at ease, and therefore call for redesigns, even of those things. It was necessary for us when South Africa was going into the acquisition program to say, and because we want women to be pilots, we want you to give us the specifications around the chairs. Because finally, when we really were hitting it and wanting to understand why certain heights and weights were only applicable if anybody wanted to be a pilot, was that it all came down to the specifics of the chairs and the whatever. We insisted that for the South African National Defence Force to be truly representatives, the recruitment of young women needed to be upped. Precisely because we are looking at an instance where someday women will run the National Defence Force. Women in the committee, we would argue that the current, and I'm still arguing, that the current primary function of the Defence Force is not right. It's not proper. We are supposed to be primarily peacekeeping. We are primarily disaster management. And that is why when we were acquiring, we're also saying the emphasis should be to really review what the primary function of the National Defence Force is, and therefore equip accordingly, and therefore budget accordingly. The most difficult one to sell in our sector was the sexual orientation. I mean, I still meet my colleagues in the different war colleges who say to me, you guys are still crazy. On this sexual orientation matter, you are crazy.
What is the reason?
They don't want homosexuals in the Defence Force in Africa.
When I was appointed into this post, I then recommended to SANDF that we needed to establish a structure, like a committee, that would then meet on monthly basis to take stock of progress and challenges experienced. And we then, through a consultative process, adopted a gender mainstreaming action plan, which this committee then met once a month to look at our implementation of the actual plan. So, I think this was the best strategy, because then we're very clear in terms of what needed to be done, by who, with what, by when. So I think for us, this was the key, to advancing this agenda.
What is the gendered environment like currently?
Very exciting, in the sense that women are now found in all the core musterings of the SANDF, and with our military equipment that has not been gender friendly, something is being done about that in terms of modernizing it, so that women do not have to struggle in using the equipment. For example, women in the artillery, they have to pick up these 45 kg projectile and load them into the guns. And, some of the women are small built, and picking up 45 kg is a bit of a struggle. And, so all that has come to the fore, with women participating everywhere. The new ships that have been bought are gender friendly. And in terms of the aircrafts, the Chief of the Air Force has undertaken a project, that addresses the ejection seat, because it doesn't accommodate lightweight women. We do have a gender budget that was allocated, to specifically cater for the training of women. As we all know that in terms of our own socialization, at times we tend to be a bit submissive, and that you find that much as we are subjected to the same training, women and men, we tend not to be assertive enough. I think the main thing is institutional mechanism. You need a warm body that would take responsibility for this. It can't be an over and above job, because then if that is the case, it means this would be the very last thing that any incumbent will have to consider. You'll do this once everything else has been done, and that would not be good enough. So, the institutional mechanism, and again the buy-in by all commanders at all levels, because even in our case, we are able to make progress, because the performance agreements of all commanders at all levels have gender as a key area of responsibility. So people will then know that if they are assessed, then they'll have to also tell as to how far have they gone in pursuit of this agenda. So I think this is one concrete way of ensuring that we move.
up in Pietermaritzburg, and I studied in KwaZulu-Natal. When I got married, I relocated and came to Pretoria, and I've been in Pretoria ever since. I first entered this, I didn't grow up in the South African Police Service. I was a lateral entrant into the police service. I entered in 1999 as a divisional commissioner, and then in 2002 I was promoted to a deputy national commissioner.
Did you ever see yourself ever joining the police?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, but I guess one matures and destiny takes you to places you don't often anticipate. But just a highlight for me, I think one of the most achievable or the laudable things that happened in my career was going to the South African Police Service, because I think it has been an absolute honor for me to serve policemen and women, to get a window into the challenges they face, the hardships they face, the loyalty with which they serve, the high levels of commitment, the almost impossible things that they do on a daily basis and just take for granted. So for me, it was a real privilege working in the South African Police Service. The police was on a cusp for change. There were many things, exciting opportunities, because in 1999 there were actually 2 of us that were appointed on the level of divisional commissioner. It was Commissioner Stander and myself. And I think that was significant for the police, because it was the first time, I think even in the paramilitary or military organizations, that a woman had achieved that level in either of those organizations. So I think it heralded a lot of expectation. It put a lot of pressure on us to say that now we have reached that level. How do we use that position to actually create the space for other women? How do we see it as a platform for uplifting women generally? So it was an exciting time, and you know, the women, there were a number of women, fortunately, appointed in relatively high positions in the police at that stage. And I think what we all had as a very passionate drive is that we don't just think that we have arrived and we, you know, kick the ladder away and somebody else can't climb up it. We all took upon that collective responsibility to say that we need to provide the empowerment, we need to provide the role models, we need to mentor and coach women at other levels in the organization so that we form the springboard for women generally. A lot of change actually took place in the South African Police Service, but I think one of the most laudable things was the launch of the Women's Network. This was launched at the head office, in all the divisions and in all the provinces. And I think that actually put in place then a champion for driving change in the organization, for, you know, an owner for women empowerment in the organization. And so we use that as a platform to drive many, many things in the organization. Just to cite a few examples of what I think the South African Police Service should be commended for. We had the first provincial commissioner appointed, Commissioner Mbombo. I mean, before that, you know, there was not even a person at a deputy provincial commissioner level that was driving operations. You see, in 1999, there may have been lots of people in the South African police, like myself, but all in support positions. No one really taking charge of operations. No one heading these critical, macho, you know, positions in the organization, reflecting the core business of functional policing. So her appointment was very significant for all of us, because it was the first lady leading a province, and I think she did a sterling job. It was challenging. She had, you know, many difficulties, but in the end she did a sterling job. Then there were no women pilots in the police, and you know, then we had to get onto a program to embark on to bring in women pilots in the police. And I remember, you know, the early training of the women pilots, and somebody had a little accident, and people were saying, you see, that's why there shouldn't be pilots. Men won't do such things like this. But I mean, it was important. It was part of the learning process. It was growing, developing. We were all learning and becoming enriched by different challenges women faced.
went to the Air Force Base in 28 Squadron in Pretoria. Then they took us for a flip to Magadla. Then I realized maybe I should try this. This should be interesting and fun.
And are you enjoying it?
Yes, I am very much.
Why? What about it?
It's different, and it's each and every day. It's challenging. It's challenging you anyway. So you can't just sit down and don't think or do anything about it. You have to every time be on your toes and thinking on what's next. What am I going to do next?
Isn't it challenging for you being one few women among so many men?
Not really. If you firstly think of yourself as being a woman amongst the men, then it will be challenging. But then if you just think yourself as one of them, it's just like one cause and doing one thing, all of us, and then I don't think, no, not really.
Okay.
The one bastion of, I think, male dominance in the police service was their task force. And a few years ago, we actually had the first women in the task force. And you would have read in the media that, you know, they said women were there to lower standards and, you know, this was not their territory and they didn't have the upper body strength to hang from choppers and to, you know, do all these daring things. But to say the women really proved us correct, because they went in, it's a grueling course. And they survived, you know. They came out with their wings and we were all very proud of them. So, you know, yes, in 1999, early 2000s, the police was a difficult, challenging place. But I think the women were resilient. They were up to the challenge. And I think they were really committed to make sure that they earn their place alongside men as equal counterparts in policing. And when one looks back and reflects on, you know, all the major things that have been achieved, yes, you think that there are many victories for women.
So, I mean, talking about changing the mindset of the police, I mean, from your experience, what do you see or what have you seen as the special contributions of women to the police force and to, you know, security, the way we understand security as a nation?
Look, it's undoubtedly recognized that women bring a different dimension to policing. They bring a soft approach, they bring a caring approach, they bring a nurturing approach to policing. You know, they just don't want to go in guns blazing. They want to go in trying to resolve and to diffuse the situation. And I think if you analyze the policing strategy over the last few years, it has been very heavily focused on crimes against women and children, on community policing. And I think that's the value proposition that women brought to policing.
Okay. And talking about violence against women, I mean, it's still quite one of the biggest tragedies for South Africa that we still do have very high levels of gender-based violence. Why do you think this persists after 16 years?
I think it's the state of our society. And maybe we are not doing enough at schools, we're not doing enough in community-based organizations to actually create this mindset of respect, mutual respect, tolerance. You see, I think women face challenges these days because they've entered the workplace. They're no longer seen in traditional roles. And yet in the home, they're expected to be the primary caretakers and they have the additional responsibilities and there's no rebalancing of chores at home. So expectations of women are to be par excellent in the workplace. It's to be a super mom. It's to take on all the additional responsibilities. And of course, something has to give. You can't be perfect at all, juggling all these things, you know, all the time. It's just a job that is just too intense. And I think we actually need a revisiting of the mindset of saying that, you know, women now need to have a different set of rules that apply. There needs to be co-responsibilities, there needs to be shared responsibilities, and there needs to be far greater levels of tolerance for what women do, and an appreciation of, you know, sometimes the non-monetary value that they add. You know, what they do can't always translate to economic benefit or economic value, but they do a host of things that, you know, that convert to non-monetary value, but important things.
South South Africa has committed itself to creating peace and security on the African continent. It has deployed peacekeepers to, amongst other, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Burundi, Central African Republic, and Sudan. One of the noticeable differences in the South African contingents are the large number of women deployed. South Africa is one of the leading countries in terms of the absolute number of women peacekeepers deployed, both in the military, where currently around 10% of the peacekeepers are women, and in the police, who have reached the 40% mark. What is the added contribution women bring to peacekeeping?
For how long have you been here?
6 weeks to 7 weeks.
Do you like it here?
Yeah, you get used to it. At first it wasn't fine, but now...
At first, what was bothering you?
The environment, you know, from coming from an urban area to here, it feels different.
And if you can be redeployed again, asked to come back here, would you do it willingly?
Yeah, of course I will.
Why?
Because I know what's happening there, then I enjoyed it, so it won't be any hassle.
What are you enjoying?
Being here for peacekeeping, my work, what I do it as usual.
What impressed me once was getting to the DRC, the South African mission there. And we were negotiating with all fighting factions to disarm themselves. We were also negotiating to get the child soldiers into places of safety. And I found that without it being part of their mission, the women soldiers of our defense force were mothering these kids, were completely going out of their brief. They were recounseling, reorientating these children. Now, all the men did was throw the football at the kids and leave them there. The women went to work. So for me, it's important that you have this female element in the defense force and in the peace missions. In fact, I went to the UN and presented on behalf of women of the continent that we do not want peace missions, UN peace missions, to go out without women. And that experience was told by what happened in Rwanda. Because if you recall, in Rwanda, when there were signs of a possible massacres, that time people just thought it would be a massacre. They didn't even think of a genocide. That word had gone out to the United Nations to say, help. That they took their time, whatever it is. But when they did send in the mission, it was male. And the women in both Rwanda and Burundi said to us, and our rescuers added to our misery, we were raped. When we spoke, we used to have a body of female ex-combatants in the continent. When we spoke to the commanders and generals of the Sierra Leone, of Liberia, same experience. When we looked at the Sudanese experience and the Ugandan experience, the whole issue of forced wives came in, of girl children first being abducted in as child soldiers and then being forced to become wives came in. When the rescuers come in the form of missions, instead of helping these victims, them also expecting sexual favors. So we then took a position to go and address the UN. We got that platform, and we insisted, and I think it was accepted, that no peace mission, at least in our continent, must go out without at least 15 to 20% of women.
the park, it's not easy. It really is not easy. I mean, this is an environment that is predominantly male, where many of us, both women and men, hold certain patriarchal attitudes, you know, because some of us believe that women have no place in defense. I mean, they have no role to play at all, and that we need to train to really accelerate our gender training in all perspectives, so that, I mean, people should understand and accept that it's individual choices. If people want to contribute in a particular sector, the necessary measures must be put in place in order to create a conducive environment for one to succeed. It's not easy. I would say that with dedication and unyielding determination, you know, to when you believe in a particular cause and want to make that difference, understanding that, I mean, whatever you're doing, you're paving the way for those who come after you, just as the previous generation, the Sisjekis and the Thandi Modises did during their time. Now it's my time to create the necessary conditions for those who come after me.
Any woman that wants to succeed in, I think, in any senior management position needs to have a very good support system. And fortunately for me, I've always had that good support system. Well, I think the way the women have harnessed their collective energy, they've stood together as a team, and the way senior women in the South African Police Service set themselves up as role models for those at the other levels in the organization. Because if we can do that, then what we are doing is we're opening up a dream of every constable, every young woman constable entering the South African Police Service, that they can aspire to be a national commissioner, a provincial commissioner, a deputy national commissioner, that really the destiny is in their own hands.
After all these years, you know, I look back and I think, well, that was good. There are achievements. I think I now and then must remind myself it was good to sacrifice time. The drafting of 1325, the advocacy we ran around the world, getting head of states to agree to let that resolution go through unchallenged at the UN. I'm very proud of that contribution. I'm very proud of making sure that, first of all, in my own organization and in South Africa and in the continent, that there is space for people to even acknowledge that we know something about security. I'm very happy that within myself, looking at the security sector, that South Africa has played a role, and in a very small part, that not only myself, but women in the ANC have played a part. I am always happy, like this morning I watched Morning Live, and I saw these women pilots. Makes your heart very happy. Makes my heart very happy to know that one day, all the services here will be in the hands of young women of our country. But even if it is not all of them in the hands of women, they will be in the hands of a very representative South Africa that is stable, that is peaceful, that is forward-looking. When women take a stand sometimes in areas which are predominantly male, they cause more actions even when they actually think they're helping. They tend to be isolated. But on a personal note, once a woman is interested in the military and security issues, somehow society thinks there's something wrong with them. And these people can't appreciate the softer things in life. That's not true. It is precisely because you appreciate the softer things that you want to take steps that will prevent those softer things being taken away. I'm a poet. I hardly have time to write. I'm a mom. I have hardly ever had time to raise my kids. I am just happy that now and then when I speak to them, I get the joy of knowing that they will grow up to be strong women.
The journeys of these three women demonstrate the challenges of transformation and the endurance needed to see it through. Women have a vision of what security should look like from both the perspective of the state and the citizens. They have a human security orientation. It takes an extraordinary amount of strength, courage and support to challenge the patriarchal system that still dominates the security sector. The struggle is far from over. We are only beginning to make inroads, but we have seen what is possible.
Igama lamakhosikazi malibongwe, igama lamakhosikazi malibongwe, 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 malibongwe.